Here we're going to do the search engine optimization or SEO executive overview. This will be one of the longer trainings because SEO is usually one of the hardest channels to understand, and also because it's one of the hardest channels to actually see what the team's doing. So we're going to spend a lot more time on terminology, on some of the strategies and tactics and efforts of the team, and obviously what results look like, how much we should be spending, etc. So we're going to start out with the search engine optimization terminology just because there is so much that most individuals, unless they are experts in this space, are unfamiliar with. Even if you're a marketing executive, if you don't have particular expertise within the SEO arena, then you're going to be challenged without understanding the terminology. So the first term that you'll often hear SEO specialists use is the SERPs. SERPs stand for search engine rankings. And so your search engine rankings are obviously where your website and your content rank for different key terms. Something important to understand that we'll probably cover a couple times is that a website has like a general kind of authority in the eyes of Google, but Google doesn't really rank websites most of the time. It ranks pages. And so you're looking at a particular page to rank for a given key term that people are searching for. GMB is a Google My Business profile. And so you'll also hear different names for this, but for the most part, Google My Business is the most common one used at this time. Google has a tendency to sometimes change the names of their tools. Google My Business profile is what you will see show up in a Maps result. So if you search for your business name or you search for your particular type of business within a Maps tool, whether that's Apple Maps or Google Maps, you're going to get this profile ranking. So most people use Google Maps, but you'll see people that obviously use Apple and that use even Bing Maps. But a lot of times those applications are actually pulling from the Google data anyway. So optimizing your Google Maps profiles is really, really important from an SEO standpoint. You have descriptions on there. You have back-end website links on there. You have service lines and what you're offering and what the radius is in which you serve. There's a lot of information that goes into your Google My Business profile, and your SEO team should be very focused on those local optimizations because they are often more important than the general website rankings for a lot of different provider types. You'll find that if you look at your data, you can actually separate what amount of calls or inquiries are coming from Google Maps, Google My Business listing, which is your local rankings, versus coming from your organic rankings, which is the rankings that you have in the SERPs on the regular Google results page. So Google My Business and local maps is really, really important these days. You want to make sure you understand what that is and what your team is doing to optimize those accounts and increase your rankings within the local results. So ranking signals, these are what Google uses to determine which page is going to rank for a particular term. Very important here, there are hundreds of ranking signals, like literally hundreds, and Google is adding to them all the time, changing them all the time. So it's very, very complex. If you try and go and talk to your SEO specialist and say, hey, what are the primary ranking signals? They are going to have a long list for you, and that list can change over time. The reality is that most SEOs, even if it's an individual, but especially if it's an agency, we use a lot of software services. And so these software services track ranking profiles and they optimize pages and help give us ideas on pages and highlight what's under optimized or over optimized. And so then we apply that analysis to our strategic understanding of what we're trying to do, what we think Google wants. Remember, in all of this, Google is very much a black box. There has obviously been information that's leaked over time. As you look at your data sets, you can start to understand what seems to be having a positive impact for a particular type of website or a particular type of content. And so using that information, you can understand what Google is giving weight to in a ranking signal, but it is constantly changing. And the rankings, what might work for one type of page won't work for a different type of page or a different service line because Google wants different ranking factors for that. So there's just a lot of stuff that goes into ranking. the best way to do it is have someone that really knows the space that you're in, because it's not, like I said, it's not across the board. You can't just apply general ranking ideas. You have to have expertise particular to that space to start to understand it. And then you really need the tool support, because Google just refuses to release that information. They consider it proprietary for obvious reasons. Keywords, people are probably familiar with that one. Those are the terms for which you're ranking. And a keyword can be one word, or more often it's more what we'd call long tail. People are searching for a query, who is the best dentist in my area? Where can I go? Or let's say medical providers in Nashville, Tennessee. What causes depression, right? Those are all your search terms. And so you're trying to rank for those particular searches, because when you show up in a search, that's when it's likely that that individual is going to click through to your website. So keywords are an important part of the strategy. Long time ago, you used to be able to optimize for keywords by what was called keyword stuffing. And so this was just putting a lot of keywords on the page. That's long time ago. So if you have heard that in the past, you can forget it. Nowadays, Google uses what's called latent semantic indexing, which is really naturalized language. And so Google looks and tries to understand, is this page written by a human? Google, as we're moving into the world of AI, has different opinions on the value of AI content. At the end of the day, they just want the users to get the best answer to their query. That's what keeps them using Google, and Google makes money by having people use their product and then selling ads on their services, right? So they want people to find the right answers. They don't necessarily care if it's AI versus human all the time, but as we'll see later on as we cover some more of these terms, human expertise and experience is of critical importance for a lot of healthcare related service terms. GSC stands for Google Search Console. GA4 is Google Analytics 4. These are the latest data tools, and we'll take a look at one of these a little bit later in the data section. These are just your backend analytics. That's all it is. So you can set these up for free from Google, and they provide you your ranking information. They provide you your traffic information, where that traffic's coming from, what keywords you're ranking for, etc. Backlinks is one you've probably heard a lot. It's another one of these kind of black boxes. What are the backlinks doing? Are they helpful? Do we need to pay for them? You will have do follow backlinks, which is a bit of code that's embedded onto the back end of the site if your team knows what they're doing. So a do follow link gives more weight to Google. A no follow link would mean that there's a backlink that goes to your site. So it's a hyperlink from one site to your site or vice versa. But no follow tags tell Google not to use it for their ranking factors. So most media outlets, if you get published on a media website, if you're doing local PR, they will often have a no follow link. And the media agencies do that on purpose because they do not want people paying them for backlinks. They want people coming to them with good stories. And so they've tried to de-incentivize by having no follow links on their site. So you'll see that as an option. That's something that your backend team should be aware of if they're doing backlink outreach, because a do follow link is much more valuable than a no follow link. Backlinks are certainly not created equal. Google very much cares about the quality of the backlink. And so it doesn't matter if you have 1,000 backlinks if they're from spammy sites. Or sometimes agencies will do what's called like a private blog network or a PBN. And in those situations, they basically set up fake websites all over the place, and they will then link to these fake websites. And this is a way to try and hack the algorithm or kind of trick Google into thinking that the site that they're working on is better than it actually is, because there's all these backlinks from related sites coming in. Google does take that very much into account. Google wants to know, what is the source of the link? Is it in your area? Is it like a local chamber of commerce? That has more weight than a chamber of commerce halfway across the country. Is the backlink from a related healthcare provider, or is it from pest control website, right? The pest control website doesn't matter. Google's smart enough, the algorithm's smart enough at this point to be able to recognize relevance within backlinks. And so you definitely want to avoid working with cheap agencies or just telling your team to get as many backlinks as possible, because that can actually hurt you in the long run. If there are too many spammy backlinks coming to a website, that lowers the value and the authority of the website in Google's eyes. And so you will actually lose rankings if you have too many low quality backlinks or too many irrelevant backlinks or backlinks coming from like a PBN. Sometimes you'll find certain backlink agencies, and what they'll do is they'll get a lot of clients in a particular niche. And so let's say that's dentists. And so what they'll do is they'll put all these backlinks between all of their clients. And so you have dentists linking to dentists, linking to dentists. A little odd, because obviously you're linking to a competitor. And do you really want to have your site linking out to competitor sites? Probably not. Also, Google considers that to be hacking the algorithm. So usually these agencies have all kinds of ways to try and hide what they're doing from Google. But if they're caught, if you get like a manual review on your site, which the chances of something like that is incredibly small, but it is possible. And so you might get a manual review and then manual penalty because Google sees that you're trying to hack the algorithm, which obviously it does not want. So in those situations, you have to be careful with your backlink. So as you can see, there's a lot that goes into backlinking. The probably simplest way to break it down is you want as many high quality relevant backlinks as possible. So there should be some part of your SEO strategy that is connected to backlinks, because they do have a fairly decent weight within the ranking algorithm as of today. Core vitals is something that you'll hear about within the SEO world. So there are different components of core vitals, but just understand it's how Google kind of looks at the quality of the site, the load time on the site, is it user friendly? And so there are very simple tools and software that any good SEO team or agency will be using to analyze your core vitals. And if you're getting good scores, then that is going to help you in the rankings. If you have negative core vital scores, it's going to have a negative impact on your rankings. Generally, core vitals is not something as an executive you should have to look at. If you're a chief marketing officer, this should be something that your SEO team or SEO agency is giving you insight on. Also, once core vitals are optimized, they generally stay optimized. So it is something that you can kind of do a one and done on to a certain extent. So a CMO should be taking a look at this, but other members of the executive team generally should just be able to trust that their CMO knows that this is a component that they're taking into account. EEAT. So this stands for experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. This is how Google evaluates content, especially within the healthcare sector. So EEAT relates to the quality of the content on your website. Experience, Google actually analyzes the writer of the content in addition to the content itself. So in an ideal world, you have a really well-known individual that has expertise and experience writing the content for your site that's related to obviously the topics that they are writing on. How does Google know they have experience and expertise? Well, this would only come from, are they showing up in other areas of Google? So Google will check the author's name, and then it will cross-reference them across the web and find out, are they speaking at conferences? Do they have their name on research or academic articles out there? Is there a Wikipedia page out there? Do they write a lot of content in this space, or have they done that over time? Are they mentioned in news sources? So that's your ideal world. Now, the reality is, of course, for most people, if you have an expert in a particular area, like let's say you've got a brain surgeon, your brain surgeon for your hospital is performing brain surgery. They are not writing SEO-driven content for your website. So this is one of the challenges that you have, and this is really true for any provider. Are you going to be able to get your service provider to become an authoritative content writer as well? Probably not. So what often will happen is you will ask someone to be kind of the authorized reviewer of the content. And so you can put a little box and put some code on the back end that says this article has been reviewed by so and so. But again, if that individual, maybe they're really good at what they do, but they don't have a presence across the web. If they don't have a presence across the web, then it doesn't matter in Google's eyes. So you need someone that's good at what they do, but also has a presence across the web that Google can cross-reference to check their experience and their authority. Again, for most providers, it's just not a reality. You need to hire a content writer. You don't want to pay someone $70 an hour to have an expert writing the content. You want to pay someone $20 to $30 an hour to write the content. So the same thing's happening at the agency level. The agencies generally are not hiring PhDs to write their SEO content. Clients aren't willing to pay that much to get quality content on the site. So you're trying to find a balance there. Can I get really quality content that has authority, that's trustworthy, that's well written? And that is 100% possible, right? That's how the entire world of journalism works. You have people that are not experts in a particular topic, but they are researching it, they're writing about it. And so your value when you're connecting with content writers and agencies is, do they have experience in the space? Because that is going to shine through on the content they create on the website. And then do you have maybe one of these higher paid experts or the service level expert that is able to check the content from time to time, provide some feedback, provide some review? That would be a great way to do it. You'll often hear the terms black hat versus white hat in the SEO world. Black hat means that you are going against Google's guidelines. So there is nothing illegal here. There is nothing unethical or immoral about black hat tactics within the SEO space. What it basically means is that you are trying to find loopholes in the algorithm to hack the way that the website ranks. And your risk there is that Google doesn't want you hacking the algorithm. They don't want you using a mechanical approach. So what does that mean? The example would be keyword stuffing. So way back in like the 90s when people were doing SEO, Google's algorithm was really simple. It would say, does this page have a lot of relevance for the search? And it would just do a simple keyword count. And it'd say, okay, this page has 50 mentions of that keyword. This page only has 10. We're going to rank the one that has 50 mentions. And so you literally see pages of content where you had a standard article and then you just have the key term stuffed all over the place randomly, or maybe in a box at the bottom of the page. That is considered black hat because you're trying to hack the algorithm. So again, the risk there is that Google doesn't want that. So Google's always improving the algorithm. Generally, there are almost 4 algorithm updates a day that come out at this point. Obviously, they're pretty small most of the time, but still, you have a lot of algorithm updates happening all the time, every single day. So Google is always trying to combat any kind of hacking. And that includes AI. So as AI content becomes really pervasive and it's very low cost to create, for the most part, AI content's pretty derivative. It's not high quality. It lacks the experience, the expertise, the authority, the trustworthiness. And so Google is looking for ways to recognize and then devalue AI content. So AI content could be considered a little black hat at this point in time, because if you are ranking for it and it's working for you, Google considers that's a hack. They're trying to find ways to minimize or mitigate people using that tactic. And so they will eventually figure out more tools to be better and better at recognizing AI content and de-ranking it, et cetera, et cetera. So your best bet for SEO content is always to go, and SEO tactics in general, is always to go white hat, because that gives you more safety. You might be able to find a black hat loophole, but you should be pretty assured that Google is going to close that loophole at some point. And so then any rankings you had from it are going to shoot to the bottom. It's not a legal issue. It's not an ethical issue. It's just a tactic issue. And so some business owners will say, hey, we don't care about the black hat tactics. If we can rank for 6 months and that drives patience and revenue, then we're happy to pay for that tactic for as long as it works. Other providers say, no, we don't want to take that risk because we're investing all this time, all this money. We want it to be evergreen. We want it to be long lasting. And then there is a very small risk that you could get a manual penalty. So both the algorithm and manual reviewers do review sites. And if they determine that site to be using black hat tactics, then they will penalize the site. And you can actually get like a permanent manual penalty on the site that you have to then manually go and do things, submit things to Google saying, hey, we understand we made a mistake here. We are changing our ways. Here are the changes we're making, et cetera, et cetera. So as a agency owner, I always tell healthcare providers to stay white hat just to avoid that risk. It's the right thing to do. And long term, it's going to be a better investment for the organization. Cannibalization is a term that you might hear from your SEOs. So when you are ranking content on Google, as I mentioned, it generally ranks pages. And so if we're ranking for the search dental implants or gastric bypass surgery or veterinarian near me, right? Whatever the term is, Google is only going to rank one page. So you have to be very strategic in the content that you're creating from an SEO standpoint, because if you have two pages that are focused on the same key terms, then what's going to happen is they're actually going to fight each other for rankings in the SERPs. And so if they're fighting each other, Google doesn't really know which one to rank. And so usually what will happen is you will get lower rankings on both pages. Rather than Google choosing a winning one and saying, okay, we're going to rank this page of your content and not that one, Google will kind of get confused, not be sure which one to rank, and then just decide to rank both lower or maybe not rank either one. So you have to make sure that your SEOs have a content plan and are constantly monitoring the content related to the keywords that you are writing for, so that you do not have duplicate keyword focuses on different pieces. So very, very important. This comes up a lot because sometimes we will get providers that want to write a lot about trending topics, or maybe they will hire our agency to do SEO and then they'll have an internal content writer that's doing other things like trending topics, for example. And in those situations, the internal content writer might be writing pieces of content that have the keywords that we've already optimized for SEO. And now we have a cannibalization issue. And so now a piece of content that we had ranking number one now drops off the first page of Google because this cannibalization is occurring. So you have to make sure there's coordination and strategy around any content that you're writing. You might hear the term disavow file. So we talked about spammy backlinks, and if you get too many spammy backlinks, then that becomes a problem. This can actually be an attack. So very rarely, but you might have a competitor that purposely pays to send and have someone build a bunch of spammy backlinks to your website. Anyone can attach a backlink to anyone else's website. So they're saying, hey, why don't you go and find a bunch of porn sites and then send a bunch of backlinks to our competitor's site? And then suddenly you might see your rankings just drop off a cliff because Google says, oh, this is a spammy site. This is not a healthcare provider. It's got all these bad backlinks going to it. In those situations, you can create what's called a disavow file. And so basically you say, hey, we recognize all these links coming in. We did not try to attract these links. These links came from somewhere else, maybe for nefarious purposes. Maybe it's just junk that we've accumulated for whatever reason. We're going to send it to Google and say, hey, please just ignore this content. And Google will do that. So it'll just say, okay, we'll ignore all those backlinks and we won't penalize you for the spammy backlinks that you have on your site as long as you've let us know about them. Crawl speed is something that is valuable to understand for very large providers. It's much more important. So Google only has so much of a crawl budget and how fast it moves through your website. And so you have a Google spider or a spider bot that comes onto the site. And really what it does is it follows links. That's how Google knows where stuff is on a website, is it follows the links. That's kind of the road system that Google is using. So as you have all these links between pages on your site, Google is going to scan those, and then it's going to index that content and give it a ranking and say, okay, this content ranks page 1, this content ranks page 2, this content is position 1, this content is position 6, whatever the case may be. But Google doesn't have infinite resources. Google is paying money to constantly be scanning the internet. And so in that situation, Google may only crawl and index 50 pages on your site. So you want to make sure that Google is getting access to your most important pages, which is why you'll have something called click depth, which is the number of clicks away from the home page that piece of content is. And so if you have a service level page, this is something that you do that's your offering to your community. That's a service page. It's almost always going to be in your main menu. So it is 1 click away. So you have a click depth of 1. And then you might have a supporting piece of content for that service page. And so I have to click to the service page, and then I have to click to the supporting content, and that would be a click depth of 2. And so the farther away things are, the less likely Google is to crawl them, just based on your crawl budget and the speed of the bots on your site. So for the vast majority of providers, this really doesn't matter. Their sites are too small. If you have 100 pages on your website, Google can crawl that in seconds, right? It's in there, it's out, it's done. If you've got thousands of pages on your website, that's where it starts to become a problem. So this is more a problem for the WebMDs of the world, the Amazons of the world, providers or companies that just have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pages. Interlinking, as I just mentioned, that is how Google gets through your website, but it's also how Google understands your website. So Google makes the assumption that if one page of your content is linking to another page, there is relevancy between those pages. So that is really important from an SEO standpoint. You actually have to strategically and intentionally link relevant pages together, because as Google crawls your site, it not only gets a sense of that page and ranking that page, but it gets a sense of your overall website's expertise, experience, authority, and trustworthiness, and what your expertise is in. So are you a dental clinic? Are you a hospital? Are you a bariatric surgeon? Are you an orthopedic provider? Google is going to understand that from the content. And then what are all the services that you offer? So let's say you're a hospital. Do you provide cancer treatment? Do you provide pregnancy care? Right? If you don't have that content on your website, or if that content's low quality or small in number, Google is going to make the assumption that you don't have a high level of expertise here. So if you have a competitor hospital, or if you have a local physician or a local outpatient surgery clinic, and they have that kind of content to a stronger degree than you do, then Google is going to assume that that other provider is better at that particular service and is going to be more likely to rank that other provider's website and their content. So the quality of your content and the amount of your content is very important to Google, and interlinking is one way that your SEOs need to be thinking about your content so that it is telling Google what you're good at. And also it goes back to that crawl speed and the crawl depth. How much time is Google taking to analyze all that content? Does it get there easily? Does it see it all? Important pieces. Last one is your money, your life, YMYL. And so Google has, again, 4 updates a day, but they also tend to have major algorithm, or what are often called core algorithm updates. And so one of these was the Medic update a couple of years ago. Google very much cares about how people are getting information about finances or health or their life. They want people to not just find the right information, but also they don't want people to be scammed. And this was something that was happening pretty significantly not too long ago. And so Google put a higher emphasis on it, because again, what does Google want? Google wants to give people the right information, wants people to use Google. And so if people are finding bad information, low quality information, or especially if they're getting in front of hackers and scammers, then they absolutely want to make sure that that stuff is higher quality. And so that medical review component comes in there. Obviously there's a lot of new age science out there. There's a lot of alternative healthcare practices. Google actually intentionally downranks most of that unless people are searching specifically for those kinds of keywords. So if you're searching for something like mental health care, it's very unlikely that a Reiki provider that says that their Reiki services are going to improve your mental health is going to rank, because Google wants evidence-based, scholarly, research, academic supported content and services being shown versus alternatives like Reiki, for example. Okay, understanding SEO. I want to give a general overview here because it is hard for individuals to understand what is SEO doing, what are we paying for, what are we trying to accomplish with it. And of course, the first place to start is the algorithm. How in the hell do you rank a page of content on Google? So just emphasizing here, lots of updates, lots of fluctuations. SEO can be a very frustrating investment for this reason, because Google is constantly updating the algorithm. Like I said, 4 times a day is now the average. And so you may be ranking really well one day, and then you may completely fall off a cliff the next day because Google put in an algorithm update that has decided that your content no longer qualifies to rank. And sometimes this is outside of your control. So sometimes Google will say, from now on, we are only going to rank government content for this particular search. So let me give you an example of how this might play out. So if I look for alcoholism treatment near me, it's very likely that local providers are going to show up in that search. So years ago, you could have national rankings. If you did really, really good SEO, you could do a search for alcoholism treatment near me, or dental implants near me, or surgery near me, whatever. And you could actually show up nationally, which was great for healthcare providers that were able to serve people from across the country, or for their particular patients that were willing to fly in. Really good for cosmetic surgeons, for high-end residential style rehabs or mental health providers, anyone providing some kind of cosmetic surgery, like really high level dental implants, things that are expensive that people are willing to pay for and travel for. So those were really great. Google said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. Why? Because people, for the most part, they want to go local. And so we want to give people what they want. And so we're going to show local results. And so they changed the algorithm so that you could never show up for farther than, let's say, 30 miles away for a particular search term. So that was one example. But then also, now if I change that search, and instead of searching for alcohol treatment near me or dental implants near me, I just search for a dental implant or alcoholism, Google knows that that's an informational search. You're not looking for a healthcare provider at that point. You're looking for general information. And so Google says, we want government websites to show up because government has authority on these topics, or we want really information-focused websites to show up, like a WebMD. WebMD is very information-oriented. It doesn't necessarily have any skin in the game in terms of getting a patient to call a particular provider. And so for that reason, it's considered a little bit more trustworthy in Google's eyes for just basic information. So Google will change the entire results set and say, from now on, we're not going to rank a provider. If you're providing services, you will not show up on the first page of rankings. We are just going to rank these informational websites like a Healthline, like a WebMD, like a Wikipedia. And so in that situation, there's no way for you to get your rankings back because Google has changed the way they display the results set. Also, really important to remember that your rankings change based on location, based on personalization, which we'll talk about in a second. Again, there's hundreds and hundreds of ranking signals that Google takes into account. And so you are trying to use your best knowledge, because again, Google doesn't share the information publicly, and even trying to get it from Google employees, there are really strict codes of silence around any kind of disclosure related to algorithms and rankings. So your SEOs have an understanding from leaked information from Google, but mainly from the data that we've compiled over the years. So really good SEOs are talking to each other. When we look at massive data sets, we can see generally what Google seems to be valuing or not valuing. We run a lot of split tests. And so we can run a test and say, okay, does Google really want to see this medical reviewer status on a blog post? Does it have an impact? And so we'll take a couple of websites, test it out, and that will be the only thing we change, and we'll see if that has a positive impact on rankings. Yes or no. Now we know that yes, Google's taking that in. It's giving a lot of weight to that particular signal. So a really good SEO team is talking to others and then also running tests on a regular basis, because each vertical is different, each service line or niche is different. And so we have to get data specific to that particular niche. Individualization or personalization, as Google often calls it, Google takes that into account these days. So you can be sitting right next to someone and you can both search for the same exact term and you will get different results being displayed. That is personalization. Google is saying, here's how this person tends to search and what they're looking for. And so we think this result set would be better for them, and this result set would be better for the person sitting next to me. It can even be the type of results that are displayed. So Google knows if you prefer video content versus written content. And so if it sees you clicking video content a lot of the time or spending a lot of time on video content, it will show you video results for particular searches more than maybe the person sitting next to you. So this has really changed the game. And again, it's something that frustrates executives. It's something that frustrates SEOs, because we can't just rank a page and call it good. We really have to have a lot of different pages we're ranking for. We have to look at different kinds of content on those pages, because there's so much variability in the results that Google is displaying, even for the same exact search for people sitting in the same room. Location is critical for Google. It's one of the largest ranking factors right now as we speak. We've seen just the radius of where healthcare providers are ranking on Google in the maps, in the local maps algorithm, shrinking and shrinking. Again, years ago, we could rank nationally. If we had really, really good SEO, big enough budget, enough investment in it, we could rank across the entire country. Then it kind of shrunk down to state level. Now it's basically anywhere from a 10 to a 30 mile radius on average, depending on the type of provider that you are and what Google thinks is the appropriate radius for you to serve. Also depends on competitors in your market, because the Google algorithm ranks locally. In those situations, if you have someone that is 10 miles across town, they're highly likely going to dominate the search rankings in the area where they are immediately around their facility. You could have the best SEO in the world and Google may still prioritize them, even if they don't do any SEO investment and they're not good from an SEO standpoint. If someone is standing a block away from their facility, Google may still have them rank first for that person searching there than for your website, even though you've invested so much time and money in your SEO efforts. Your result sets definitely change based on your location. And so Google's reading the IP address for your internet service provider. It's reading your mobile phone address, so it knows where you are from a location data standpoint. And if you actually do a search and you do a search at your office versus across the street versus down a mile down the road at the coffee shop versus at your house 20 miles away, you will get different search results that show up every time you do your search. So location is very important as a ranking signal, and just keep that in mind. Sometimes we will get comments from executives and they'll say, okay, well, yeah, I just did a search for this particular really important key term and we're not ranking at all. While that individual is sitting at a conference in a completely different city. So Google is not going to display your pages for your result set because you're just too far away. And if he does that same search and he does it 5 miles from the facility, or she does it 5 miles from the facility, they'll find that there's actually a good opportunity that they're going to show up as long as you've invested in the right SEO tactics. There used to be 2 different algorithms for local rankings. We talked about the map pack. If you do a search on your phone in Google Maps, that has a different ranking algorithm than the organic SERPs, which is what you get on a traditional display when you're doing a desktop search or a mobile search using Chrome or a different browser. Nowadays, it's blended, so the 2 algorithms are pretty integrated, but they still have different factors that impact them. And so obviously location on a map search is given a lot more weight than on a traditional organic search. you have to be optimizing your content for both depending on where you want it to be ranking. And your team has to know what optimizations to put in place to help it rank for both a maps search as well as an organic search. Really important these days, and this has been a hard one for agencies, for SEO teams, and for executives to really deal with, is no-click searches. Nowadays, we can go onto Google and we can make a search, and Google will provide the answer in a featured snippet, or it will provide a knowledge panel, which is like an example of that business with pictures, the phone number, a little bit of information about it, the address, without even clicking to the website. So for many searches these days, individuals can find the information they need without clicking your website. And of course, we have AI. A lot of people are using ChatGPT and other AI tools to aggregate information, to do searches for them. And so again, the AI tools are not going to your website. The individuals are not seeing your website. They're just getting a summary from ChatGPT or whatever AI tool they're using. This is hard for providers because they're seeing their traffic drop and drop and drop and drop. And we'll take a look at one individual that we have a large data set on. So one of our larger clients that gets millions of hits in a given year, seeing those results, how it impacts it is going to be something that is frustrating, but also helping us understand that even though we're not showing up for, or even though we're not getting traffic to the website, we're still getting calls, we're still getting rankings, we're still getting visibility. We just don't have as much of a tracking component. So I want to take a look at that really briefly here. So if we look on Google, here we did a search for medication management San Diego. We can see that Google is telling us, the first thing we see is a map pack. And so you notice I didn't get any ads here. Why don't I have ads? Because I'm searching for a medication management practice, right? Google's not showing me ads because it knows that I am not in San Diego right now. So the likelihood that I'm actually looking for a service provider is small. And so Google is smart enough to say, we're not going to show this person ads because we don't want the people paying us for those ads to get and pay for clicks that are not relevant or not likely to turn into patients. So I'm not getting those ads. That's actually a good thing because it says Google's smart enough to know where I am, and smart enough when it's showing your ads, it's not going to show them to someone that is too far away. Very helpful. So we get the map results here. You can see that I can get directions immediately to it. I can click onto this and I can get the phone number right away. I never have to visit the website. So that's an example of no-click information. And if we scroll down, now we start getting to the SERPs here, and we have all these different providers and where I could go. If you scroll to the bottom, you can also see it will give you information. Where am I currently based? Are these results personalized or not personalized? You can actually set that as a setting within your browser, or it's based on what Google knows about you. And so I don't do a lot of medication management searches for San Diego, so Google doesn't really have relevant data to feed into these search results. Now let's change this, and let's change just to medication management, and we'll see how that changes the result set. So see, now here I get a little snippet, right? So I get a featured snippet right at the top. And again, this is a no-click search. We also have the people also ask feature, and so it gives us more information. And again, these are no-click searches. So I can say, oh yeah, that's right, I'm kind of looking for that information too. It will show the website, so you do get an impression here. People are seeing your name, they're seeing your logo, and if they want more information, they can absolutely click into that and get more information, which will then give you a click, which a lot of people value, because we assume that if we can get them to our website, they're more likely to want to learn about us, they're more likely to inquire, more likely to become a patient, which is accurate. The challenge for organizations these days is we have to rely on both result sets. We want to be showing up in these featured snippets because this is great. We get highlighted in this way, and we're more likely to get more authority in our communities if we're constantly showing up as a featured snippet, but we're just not able to see the tracking as much from a traffic standpoint or a click standpoint. Something we always tell providers is traffic is an okay metric to be looking at, but really at the end of the day, we care about qualified inquiries, right? Are people inquiring about our services? Are we having new patients coming in the program? And so you'll often see a situation where your traffic is dropping, but your qualified inquiries are staying the same. In those situations, we don't really care if we're not able to get the click data as long as we're still getting those qualified inquiries. Then moving on into strategy. So how do we think strategically about SEO? There's all these ranking factors. We have on-page, we have off-page, we have technical, all this stuff going on. We don't know what any of it is, right? Unless you're an SEO specialist, you aren't going to understand most of this stuff. So what broad strategies should we be looking at when we're thinking about SEO and trying to evaluate the value of our agency or our internal team? Really important with SEO is understanding content silos. So as I talked about, Google tries to understand your website and what your EEAT is. Where is your expertise? The way that Google understands that, for the most part, is your content. Do you have content and robust content and a lot of content on the topic of the services with which you provide to your community? So we're always thinking in silos. So let's say we're going to take a mental health provider. We're going to have a depression silo. We're going to have an anxiety silo. We're going to have an ADHD silo. We're going to have a main piece of content that talks about how we provide services for that particular diagnosis. And then we're going to have a lot of supporting content, second tier content, third tier content that talks about different issues within that particular subject. I like to explain it as like an essay structure for a university paper. You have your main topic, and then you have your subtopics in any kind of point that you're trying to make. That's how Google thinks about your website. You have your primary service pages. Usually that's the service that you're offering for the particular problem that patients are trying to solve or the desire that they're trying to meet. And then you have all the supplemental content around it. You should have a robust content silo for all of the services that you provide. And if you're just starting off with SEO or creating content, you should focus on the services that you provide the most of. So if you provide if you sell a lot of dental implants, then you want to start off with your dental implant silo. If you are focused on orthodontics and orthodontia, then you want to start with that silo. If you're an addiction treatment provider and most of your patients come in for alcohol versus cocaine, you should start with your alcohol treatment silo. That's how you want to think of a silo strategy. A little bit more terminology. So your high intent terms are people searching for things that are important to them now, right? Dental implant, dental implants near me, best dental implant provider in city name, how to lose weight in city name, or lowest cost solution, or best solution for XYZ. Those are your high intent terms because those are people looking for your services right now and are the most likely to take action in the short term. So we often call those money pages as well because those are the pages that are generating the revenue for the organization. You have a lot of supporting content that does not. So your supporting content is informational, it's educational. These are not terms that people are going to come to you for treatment right away for. So you might be evaluating teeth whitening treatment versus teeth whitening strips. We want a page for that content, not because people are going to call off of it, but because it's helping Google recognize us as an authority in teeth whitening in general. Yes, it can potentially convert. Someone could hit that page and be like, oh, that's really good information. I will choose a teeth whitening treatment with this dentist rather than doing the strips. Very possible. But you also have to think about it from Google's standpoint. How do you show Google you're an authority? That's by having high quality content that is related to the primary service you're providing, even if it's not going to generate inquiry all the time. Your interlinking structure is very important between those pages. Your teeth whitening page should not be linking to your page on cavity treatment. That is going to muddy the waters, confuse Google a little bit. Like, so are they experts in teeth whitening? Are they experts in cavities? It doesn't seem clear. Again, going back to the essay side of this, if you have an essay and you seem to jump from topic to topic to topic, that doesn't make a lot of sense. even if you have expertise on all of those things, we're not going to cram them randomly in. It has to have a logical structure for our readers to really understand what's happening. Google has to have a logical structure for your website, and you do that through your interlinking. Trending topics is a strategy that you can use. So we mention it here. If a topic is trending, usually a short-term value. So that's where you want to be careful with things from an SEO standpoint. If we're going to write about a trending topic, another really important factor here is that it often takes 1 to 3 months these days for Google to index content. There are millions of new pieces of content going onto the web every single day, especially with all the AI junk that's out there these days. Google obviously has limited resources. It cannot index every single piece of content that comes its way at the instant that it is put onto the web. So even though it's on your website, Google has not indexed it going back to that crawl budget, crawl speed. The Google bot will eventually come around, but sometimes it's taken 1 to 3 months to get indexed for a new piece of content. So there's a lag in your SEO results that's often frustrating for executives. Like, well, we have all this content. Why isn't it doing anything? Well, maybe half of it hasn't even been indexed yet. There are tools you can use. You can ping Google and remind them and try to speed up that process. But at the end of the day, Google's resources are Google's resources, and those are limited just due to sheer volume of content coming out these days. So trending topics have some value. You can get a big uptick if it's important to your particular patients and they're searching for it. But just keep in mind that that value is often going to be short-lived. As that topic falls out of the public consciousness, then that content is no longer so relevant. So it can be part of a strategy. We strongly recommend trending topics to be more connected to a paid media strategy rather than an SEO strategy. If you have a trending topic, write a piece of content for it and then pay to send that content out to Facebook, to X, to LinkedIn, to TikTok, and get it in front of people as soon as possible, because then you are capturing that trend in the public consciousness. Long tail versus short tail keywords. So some providers, when you look at your SEO environment, competition is a big factor in all of this. Do we have competitors that are much larger than us, that have really large SEO budgets, that are just going to dominate no matter what we do? Right? If we're only paying our SEO agency $5,000 a month and our competitors are spending $20,000 a month on their SEO, it's very unlikely that your $5,000 a month budget is going to be able to outcompete their $20,000 a month budget. So in that situation, what you're looking for is they're going to rank number 1 a lot of the time. You're hoping for a number 2 or a number 3 spot. That would be a win just based on the budget that you have. Now, part of the strategy, though, is you can say these guys are going for the money terms. They're going for these high intent terms of people looking to buy now. Are there long tail terms, people that are looking for, what is the value of teeth whitening? How long does teeth whitening last? Is there new technology coming out for teeth whitening that I should be aware of? Like these really long, lower volume, more obscure searches that a competitor might not be going after. So in those situations, you can think strategically about how are we going to create our SEO strategy so that we're maybe able to be successful with different result sets or a different kind of patient than a competitor just based on our size or budget, etc. Also, I should mention that obviously a large provider wants to go after all of that. Like if you got a $20,000 a month SEO budget, you want the short tail, you want the long tail. I mean, you want to own all the searches if at all possible. Multi-location sites versus multiple sites. This is an article that I've linked to outside of this training, so I strongly recommend reading that for an in-depth approach. But just understand again that Google is ranking pages. They're not ranking websites for the most part. And location is a very important ranking signal. So if you are a large provider and you have multiple locations across the state or across the city or across the country, it is strongly advisable to have multiple websites. That way you can rank each of those websites in your local markets. So we've split tested this quite a bit working with larger providers, and we've seen very consistently that having one umbrella site with a bunch of location pages on it is much less likely to get top ranking results in a community versus a unique website with dedicated SEO for that website. Also, again, because Google really ranks pages, let's say that we have that teeth whitening service as an example. Where is Google going to show the searches for teeth whitening if you have 50 locations across the country? Google is probably, you can't write a teeth whitening page for each location. You would think that Google is smart enough to know that your 50 teeth whitening pages for each location are supposed to show up in those locations, but it hasn't quite got there yet. So you can't do that. That's not really a viable strategy. So you write one teeth whitening page, and then you're trying to cram all your locations onto that one page in some way that makes sense, that doesn't seem odd or spammy, and then hoping that Google will rank that one page in multiple locations for search. That's often a big if. It's not as effective as if you had an individual site and each of those individual sites had their teeth whitening page. It works a lot better. We see about 3 to 5 times better results, both in terms of ranking and in terms of conversion. So not only is it easier to rank it from an SEO standpoint when you have a unique website, you also are more likely to see people call because they see it's a local provider, it's next to them, versus if they're on a big umbrella site, they're like, well, is this provider really near me? Do they really know my community? Is this really the right place? Because clearly they're all over the country. Those are questions that people legitimately ask. And so they have a little bit more trust, even if it's unconscious, in a local provider. So there's a lot of value to having multiple websites. And at the end of the day, if you were looking at this as kind of a mom and pop market and each of your locations was owned by some other individual as a separate LLC, they're going to have their own marketing budget. They're going to have their own website. So that money's there, and that money should be allocated appropriately to support each of your facility locations. You want to think of it as a separate P&L. Even if you're not structuring that way internally, that's the smart way to think about it from a marketing investment standpoint. So give it its own website, give it its own SEO budget, because that's actually going to be a much bigger return and bang for your buck than if you're trying to save money supposedly by just trying to have one site. It's going to be a lot harder to get results. Okay, moving over to the data side of things. How are we evaluating results from SEO? What are our KPIs? Number one is qualified inquiries. SEO is really nice. It's similar to Google Ads in some ways because we can see a search, we can see a click, we can see an inquiry, and then we can track that to an admission. Now, your SEO data, your website data really is messier than that because not every website search or click or call is a result of showing up in the SERPs. Facebook could be driving that traffic. It could be someone that heard about you somewhere and then did a search for you and called. It could be because they saw a television commercial or a billboard and they decided to do a search for you. So there's no way to parse that data. You can't actually tell if it came from an SEO driven search or if there was other marketing efforts that were driving that search intent. You can do a brand search on the back end. You can see people specifically searching for your brand. You can differentiate what's called a direct search versus an organic search. So a direct search is when people actually type in the URL for your website directly. Obviously, you'll have employees do that a lot. You'll have existing patients do that a lot. Referral sources do that a lot. So there is some directional data to get a sense of what is our SEO efforts driving versus other channels, but it's going to be very noisy. It's going to be very muddy. And so just realize that your data sets within inside of SEO related to your website, some of it is going to be purely SEO driven, and some of it is going to be from other sources. But qualified inquiries is our number one metric of success for SEO. Are we seeing growth in qualified inquiry volume? After that, there are leading indicators. Obviously, we talked about impressions and traffic. So we want to see traffic coming to the website. We want to know what the conversion rate is of that traffic, especially on our money pages, our main service pages, to qualified inquiries. Again, going back to no-click data, AI results, all that kind of stuff. Impressions are a valuable metric in this sense because we're not always going to see traffic. Rankings is important for SEO. We should be seeing that we're moving up in rankings or increasing the number of our top rankings, like positions 1 through 3. So something important here, though, to remember with SEO as we think about timelines for results is SEO is exponential in terms of the results that it gets. Think of how often you go to page 2 for SEO results. Like almost never, right? Nobody really goes to page 2. Definitely no one goes to page 3 unless the information is so bad you can't find what you're looking for, which is pretty rare these days. So when you're thinking about SEO results, you're starting off with terrible rankings. Maybe you're on page 50, you're on page 100. Your team starts to optimize and put effort into SEO to rank that particular page for a particular keyword. And then we're moving from page 50 to page 10. Oh, we're not quite there yet. Okay, let's do some more tweaking, some more optimizations. All right, now we're on page 3. Well, all that work and that effort from page 50 to page 10 to page 3, there is no impact, right? No one's getting to page 3, much less page 50. And so we see literally no results for our efforts. Now the team continues to do the work and suddenly they get onto page 1. Then we're suddenly going to start seeing data come in. We're going to start seeing traffic. We're going to start seeing calls or inquiries because page 1 is where everyone stops their search. Now, if we're at the bottom of page 1, maybe we're in position 9 in the SERPs, and then we get up to position 2. Well, most of the call volume goes to the top 3 positions on Google. So if we're looking at the top 3, that's the majority, that's often anywhere from 60 to 80% of the click and inquiry volume goes to those top 3. So then as we move from position 9 to position 2 or position 1, suddenly we get a flood of calls. There's just this exponential increase in the value of our SEO efforts. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to evaluate SEO results. Is you want to see movement towards top position rankings, but that is going to come all of a sudden, and you go from almost nothing to a ton. So you often see things be very, very bumpy from an SEO standpoint. And the same thing happens on the reverse end. If Google updates the algorithm or a competitor comes in and invests lots of money and then knocks you off at the top 3, and so suddenly you're in position 4, you'll see a big drop in traffic and a big drop in inquiries, and you're gonna have to fight to get back up there and re-optimize things differently to regain your rankings. The on-page conversion rate I talked about, obviously, it's not just about getting people to see the site. We need people to convert once they see the site. So that is part of your strategy. Now, your SEO team maybe doesn't understand conversion rate optimization. Maybe they're not website experts. That's pretty common. So you're going to have multiple team members involved. One person's usually helping out with the SEO technical side of things. One person's usually helping out with the content side of SEO. One person's helping out with strategy. Someone else is doing website and conversion rate optimization. Someone else is creating content. Someone else for graphics, right? There's a lot of team members that are involved in good SEO, and all of them are going to impact your ability to rank and then the ability of that page to convert. Backlinks, I have a question mark here. Backlinks is a strong signal for Google. There's a lot of debate in the SEO community, and there's a lot of debate in basically everything for SEO because there's so much a black box from Google. But for the most part, backlinks, you can be pretty sure if they're do follow backlinks, they have value, especially from high authority websites. Do we need to count backlinks as an element of our KPIs or accountability for our SEO team? It's a strategy question at the end of the day. So on one hand, really good content will by default generate backlinks. If you've got good content, it's ranking out there, people are just going to start backlinking to it. And so that will happen naturally. If you have a paid media strategy behind this, so you've got really good content, the content ranks, and you're also pushing it out there through paid media, that's also going to generate backlinks. And so your paid media is combining with your SEO strategy to have a cumulative positive impact. You always want to think about your channel strategies together. You shouldn't really be thinking about them as individual, discrete, or siloed channels. Everything plays together to get you better results. So you have natural backlinks coming in, and then you can do what's called backlink outreach. And this is usually dedicated staff or dedicated teams. And this is where you get those emails. You know, someone sent you an email that says, hey, we know such and such an article, and we noticed you hadn't written about this, or we thought we could provide value here. Would you mind including a link to our article? Or we see that you don't have content on this. We'll write it for you. All that we ask is that we're able to put the name of our organization that we write it, and mention it in the article. They're seeking backlinks. That's all they're trying to get is they're paying the labor cost, but they're kind of looking for free backlinks, right? So Is there value to that? Yes and no, right? It depends. And is the backlink really going to drive rankings for your page? Very questionable. There's no way to predict it. And the amount of time and money you have to invest, you ignore those emails. Most people ignore those emails. And so it's really common if you look at like a really good backlink outreach, like some agencies just specialize in it. They'll tell you that it can take anywhere from 200 to 2,000 emails to get a single backlink. So it can literally take 3 to 4 weeks before that team, and you have almost full-time effort during that time period, and they're not getting any results on it. So are you willing to pay $3,000 for a good backlink? For most organizations, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Usually a better strategy is just to acquire the natural backlinks that really good, high quality content will attract. And then a paid media push with them will also get more eyeballs on it, more people that value the content, that are linking to it, et cetera, et cetera. So backlinks, generally, I don't recommend them as a KPI you're tracking just because the outreach is so expensive. And so if you're, what gets measured gets managed, what gets managed gets measured. And so if you've got your team focusing on backlinks, then they're either going to take shortcuts and look for really spammy backlinks, which you don't want, or you're going to spend a lot of money for them to get a very small number of results versus the fact that you'll just naturally get results with good content and a paid media spend. What kind of tactics can we use within SEO? So we've got our strategy, but now thinking tactically, what specific actions can we take? One is called a content explosion. This is a really expensive strategy. So let's say that you're a new website or you've opened a new location and you've done the smart thing and you've invested in a unique website for that new location. It can take 12 to 24 months to start ranking for a brand new website. Google knows nothing about you. There's not a lot of content on it. You have a lot of competitors that have been operating for years with SEO budgets. And so they're outranking you, and they're going to for a long time unless you outspend or out-strategize them and you just have a better team in place. One way to deal with that is what's called a content explosion. You can pay for all of your siloed content, including your main service pages, your supporting content, second tier, third tier, whatever your industry needs and your service line needs for Google to start recognizing you as an authority. You can create it all at once. And you can say, okay, just 1 month, we're going to get it all done, and we're going to upload it all in that same 1 to 2 month period. And then boom, it all indexes at the same time. And Google's like, wow, this is an amazing website. They're clearly experts in their space. We're going to start ranking them. That is absolutely a very viable strategy, and it works. It's just very expensive. So for most organizations, especially if they're just starting with a new location, or if it's a new business entirely, or even if they're just starting SEO efforts for the first time, they usually don't want to drop $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 out of nowhere on SEO. So most providers will invest gradually in SEO and just gradually see the results climb. It's easier from a cash flow standpoint. It's easier to make sure that the investment is starting to get a return. If we're investing $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month, if we find out that the team is not very good or the agency is not very good, we can cut those ties and make a different decision, and we didn't just lose $50K. So that's another kind of factor to think about when you look at content explosions. The alternative to a content explosion is slow and steady, like I mentioned. And then we got high quality versus good enough. So quality content is absolutely critical. We think about that EEAT, the guidelines that Google is often using to evaluate content. The higher quality is, the better, and the more likely it is to convert, right? If you've got really good content on your website, it builds trust with the reader, with the visitor, and they're more likely to choose you as a service provider and make a qualified inquiry to seek out your services. However, it's very expensive. It's very time consuming. There is absolutely a balance to be had between the amount of time and money you're investing in content and the amount of content that you're putting out there. So again, Google's looking holistically at your site to understand your general authority, and that's going to impact your ability to rank pages. If you don't have a silo built out yet, then it's unlikely that even a high quality piece of content is going to rank. So you can go both routes, and both routes have value. what I generally recommend is if you're starting off new with SEO results, or it's a new website or whatever, start with the good enough route. Like, you don't want bad content, you don't want crappy content, but you want good enough content, and build out your silos and get them built. And then once they're built and Google starts to recognize you overall as an authority in your market, then you can go back and re-optimize that content and really invest a lot more time in it. So that's my recommended sequence of events. You don't have to do it that way, but it tends to work out quicker, and it works out a bit better from a time on return standpoint. Local focus, as I mentioned in the beginning, is critical. So your maps rankings, how your Google My Business profile is showing up in that map pack. So remember, I did that medication management search and we saw the map pack show up. That's really important because that's often showing up high in search results, and a lot of people are using those search results as their primary click for the search for them to make a decision. Your SEO team absolutely needs someone that really understands the local aspect of the algorithm, how to optimize a Google My Business profile, what back-end approaches and tactics you can use to support a local My Business profile and maps ranking or a location page. So there are very specific tactics that you use as an SEO team, as an agency, to send additional signals to Google saying, hey, this is where this location is. This is a quality provider. It's the best provider for this particular service. And so you need a team that's doing a lot of that stuff on the back end. Backlink outreach, as we talked about, that's actually spending a lot of time, a lot of money, just manually reaching out to people. Obviously, you have automated software in terms of emails and pitches and things like that you can put in there. But at the end of the day, it's still a very time-consuming approach. It's often a bit spammy to a certain degree. And so you have to take that into account. Are we annoying potential community partners by spamming them all the time, asking for backlinks? Now, you can also do a much more mellow backlink outreach strategy. And this is working with your community partners and having an actual partnership with them. And you go to maybe a referral partner and you say, look, why don't we do cross guest posting? We'll write a post related to our expertise and your services on your site. You do the same for us, and then we'll backlink to each other. Or you can go to your local chamber of commerce and say, we'd love to talk about what we can do for the community on a page on your website, and then link back. That's a really smart outreach strategy, and the ROI on that is pretty good because there's a high likelihood that they're going to say yes. And so you're not spending a lot of time and a lot of money getting someone to say yes. You just are talking to someone you're already partnering with, and you're both getting a benefit out of it. That's a really good advantage. Something that we do as an agency that's very effective is we will create really good quality pieces of content from a journalistic standpoint. And so we'll go out and we'll talk to people. We'll interview local experts. We'll interview local organizations. And then as we complete that piece and put it up on the website, obviously, people are very happy to see that. They're like, oh, I was featured there. They've got my image or they've got a quote from me. And so it's very likely that they're going to then put a backlink to their or your site on their site or their blog, or they're going to post it on their social media or whatever the situation is. So you're generating backlinks by creating goodwill in the community and also just doing really, really good quality content from a journalistic perspective. Technical optimizations, you can optimize your core vitals, you can optimize your meta descriptions, your SEO titles, the speed that your site loads at is really critical. These things are super valuable, and so there's a lot of technical expertise from the coding side, but also understanding how website speed works. You also have to have that be a collaborative effort. I should caution people there. So let's say you want a really cool video playing on the hero image. So when someone hits your website, this video plays in the background. Those are very heavy from a website standpoint, meaning that they take a long time to load. So I have this balance between having a really cool video that does have a positive psychological impact. It makes people potentially want to partake in services, but now it takes that particular page 3 extra seconds to load. anything you do on a website, anything, your bells, your whistles, when you look at all that fancy stuff on websites where things are flying across the screen, or there's interactive content, or there's videos, or a lot of images, all of that creates weight on the site. And so there's a balance between the weight, because that increases the page load time. And as you know, people hate to wait for pages to load, especially on mobile. So if you've got a page load time of 5 seconds because your page is too heavy with too much stuff, that is going to have a negative impact on your conversions as well as your rankings in Google, because Google absolutely factors speed in. You've got other things on the back end. You've got your citations that are kind of your backlinking strategy, how those are integrated into the site. You've got schema, which is kind of the machine language of the code and what you're telling Google that this page is about or this site is about. So there's a lot of technical stuff that someone needs to be aware of and managing. It can't be just content, even though content is a very important part of SEO. You still need someone that understands the technical back-end coding pieces of it. Finally, I mentioned this a couple times already. You absolutely should have a paid media strategy that is supporting your SEO strategy. The amount of traffic and the people checking out your website is a ranking factor for Google. And so if you're paying to send traffic to the site from Facebook, X, TikTok, wherever, that's telling Google that people care about you as a provider, that they find value in your site. And Google is checking the amount of people coming to the site. It's checking how many pages they visit on the site. It's watching the number of people that convert through the event tracking setup on the site, right? Because your Google Analytics is a free tool provided by Google. They use that data. They use that data to evaluate the quality of your site, the length of time that they're on the pages, your bounce rates, all these metrics to understand, do people find value in your site and your content, yes or no? So the more people you have coming to the site, the better. You should absolutely have a paid media strategy that is supporting your SEO strategy so that people are seeing all this amazing content that you're investing in. Again, you can sit on your hands and just wait for people to search. And obviously we want to show up in the rankings. We want to be top ranking. That's why we're investing in SEO, and that's great. But there's all these other people that are not searching for this particular topic at this time that we might still want to get in front of. So there should be a paid media strategy that is built on top of and combines with your SEO strategy. The psychology of SEO is actually pretty simple, right? Again, this is bottom of funnel. It's final decision making for most people. So we want to provide solutions. They've got a problem, they have a solution, or they have a desire. So we want to meet that need. We want to provide that solution. Very, very simple. Are they searching for an answer to something? Do they have a question? Again, their problem is, I've got a question. I need an answer for it. We should be providing the answers to those questions. And so there's a very strong educational component to good SEO. On pages where they land, we should also have a strategy around related content. So often you'll see like widgets, or that's where your linking strategy comes in. You have relevant links throughout the content, your CTAs, your call to actions. Maybe your call to action says call now, but maybe your call to action says check out this related piece of content. We want to think strategically about that to keep people on the site, to keep them invested in our site, which is going to increase the likelihood that they're going to call. So we don't always just want to think about the page itself as the only part of the strategy. We want to think in the totality around, are people seeing other relevant content that's going to then increase their buy-in for us. The look and feel of the website obviously is super important. We'll talk about this more in the website section of the training. It represents you and your organization. Just like the building that you walk into, when you go to a physical location, if you see lights out, if you see paint peeling off the wall, you're much less likely to buy from that organization. Your website's the same. If your website was built in the 1990s, or if you've got this cheap looking GoDaddy website, whereas your other competitors have a really nice, polished, flashy website that's modern and clean and sleek, they're probably going to go to your competitors as they run their comparisons about where they want to go and who they want to talk to. So we paid all this money to do all this SEO to get rankings, so we're getting people to our site. The site has to look good. It has to look good. And so that has to be part of our thought process as we think about these investments. So a lot of unconscious elements when it comes to how users convert from an SEO search. Call to actions are one of them. So are there too many buttons saying, hey, call now, inquire, verify your insurance, whatever the situation is? If there's a lot of those, that can feel spammy, that can feel salesy. If there's not enough of them, then we're maybe not providing enough opportunities for people to contact us, and they're searching around on the site for like, where do I get in contact with these guys? Or we're not sending these unconscious psychological reminders of like, yeah, I probably should give them a call. The button color, does it stand out, right? If the button color blends into the website, psychologically, I'm just kind of glancing past it, not paying attention to it. Whereas if it's a color that really pops out of the background of your main brand colors, even unconsciously, what you see is that people start to notice it more, right? It's kind of grabbing their attention. And so like, oh, new color, what is this thing? And so as they see your CTA maybe 3 times as they scroll through a certain page, by the 3rd time, unconsciously, they're starting to come to the idea that, hey, maybe I should give these guys a call. So those unconscious elements are important. The reading level is really important from an unconscious standpoint. On average, you'll see studies that say most Americans read at somewhere between a 6th and an 8th grade reading level. That's true for the most part. So depending on our audience and who we're targeting, we want to match that in our content. That will often that comes up with executives sometimes. They'll say, well, this content doesn't sound very professional. It's actually really hard to write at a lower level because your content writers are usually English majors or experts in the space, or at the very least they do a lot of writing, and so they're very good at it. So they actually have to lower the level of the language they're putting into a piece to make sure that it's easy for people to read. Also, easier content is just psychologically nicer to flow through. So if I'm putting a lot of complicated grammatical structures in there, or really dense information, or a lot of $5 words, then that slows down the reader. I have to think, I have to process. And if I have someone stop to process, then their mind and their brain is very easily able to shift to something else or get off of the focus that they're currently on, which we don't want. So unconsciously, we want people to be thinking or not thinking in the situation, just flowing through the content. So the more that people just naturally flow through the piece without any kind of mental stops, even if that's a stop to think through a harder word or turn a phrase, that's actually good because it keeps them on the site, kind of keeps them in a flow state and moving through the things that we want them to be doing, which is stay on the site or take the CTA, the call to action. And so that's when we think about little yeses. Every time they click a new page on the website, that's a little kind of yes, saying, I'm interested in this. I need to continue with this. Every time they click on a new page or click on a CTA, that's a little yes. They're kind of saying yes. And unconsciously, that's helping them move towards you or our client or our website as a solution for their desire or for their problem. So we've covered a lot of ground there. As I said, SEO is probably one of the more complicated and harder to understand channels, especially because the time investments are so long and a little arduous, also very fluctuating. Results are highly variable sometimes due to the fluctuations in the algorithm. So how much should we pay for SEO? That's obviously a great starting question. As you can see, the stuff is very complicated. You need a content writer because your SEO specialist is not a content writer. So if they understand the algorithm, they understand backend optimizations, they understand strategy, they're generally almost never going to be a good content writer. Those are separate people. The graphics are important. Just because they've hit that page doesn't mean that the visitor is going to convert. Usually we need something that's visually appealing. And so that can mean adding really good graphics and visual orientation into it. So I need a graphics designer involved. I also need a strong coder that understands visual design on the website. And so when our web developers upload content, they have to understand SEO because there are certain things you have to do on the back end to make sure that the page looks good for Google and also has all the SEO optimizations in place, because again, the content writer doesn't know those. And so the content writer will create the piece, but then the SEO specialist has to go in and tweak it a little bit. And then the web developer, also your technical SEO specialist, has to understand how to upload it appropriately to the site with all the appropriate schema and the way you're doing the featured snippets and the images and making sure that the load times are right, et cetera, et cetera. So you need web developers, people with design experience. You want copy editors for the content. Obviously, error rates are really common in copywriting. Your standard newspaper error rate, even with an editor, is sometimes around 5%. So 3 to 5% for small little spelling or grammatical errors is not abnormal for people creating lots of content. So you need an editor there. And then on the back end, you need a technical SEO specialist, an on-page SEO specialist, which is someone who understands the content on the site. And then you need an off-page SEO specialist, someone that really specializes in outreach or backlinks. So all these different individuals have to be involved in your SEO. It gets really expensive really quick if you're trying to do it internally. So for an outsourced agency, you will see budgets as small as $2,500 all the way up to $1 million a month. One of our clients spends $1 million a month on their SEO. They are obviously a huge national organization. They have a ton of locations, and we get a really, really high ROI on our SEO efforts. And so it's worth the continual investment. Their ultimate cost per admission is very, very low compared to their other marketing channels. So even though we're spending a lot of money, we're getting an incredibly significant return on that. And so SEO can make a lot of sense at big budgets, or it can be something that you're investing slowly in over time. Just remember, if you're not spending a lot of money on SEO, if you're trying to get away with like $1,000 a month or something, $1,000 a month is $12,000 a year. That is not even a part-time employee, much less an SEO specialist or even a decent content writer. So you have to think, what is an agency going to be able to do with a budget like that? And the answer is next to nothing. So you could maybe get an agency that does a lot of automated, maybe they have AI content, maybe they hire Filipino employees, with limited English. There are ways to try to service clients at a small budget, but it's not going to be quality work that's going to get you the efforts or the return that you want. So $2,500 is the minimum we've seen for like a really small local provider. But really, you probably don't want to be investing in SEO unless you're able to invest at least $5,000 a month. So $5,000 a month is what we would consider the starting benchmark to even be able to do SEO work that's going to see results in a reasonable amount of time. If you do these smaller budgets, again, you can still get results. It can just take forever. So for example, like we used to do really small budgets for smaller providers, and it would take 2 years for them to see results that started producing a return. Do you want to wait 2 years for your SEO investment to produce a return? Probably not. So $5,000 a month, you can start to see returns in as short as 3 months, all the way up to sometimes 12 months. It just depends on how much SEO has been done on the site before, if it's a brand new site or a long established site, and the level of competition in the marketplace. Are your competitors? How many are there? How many are we competing against? What are their SEO budgets? What are we up against in terms of the amount of time and effort we have to put into place to compete? So all of those will be factors in terms of how fast your SEO results work. But generally, you're looking at that 3 to 12 month timeline for kind of, let's say, new SEO results. If you're well established and they're just building on top of what's already there, then you can start seeing results as fast as 20 or 2 months would be generally the fastest, just the way that Google's indexing these days. You're often not going to see results faster than a 2-month window. We get questions like this all the time. Should we pay for a backlink on Forbes, for example? Forbes will charge thousands of dollars and they'll, allow you to feature a piece or slip a backlink in there. Generally, no. So a lot of Forbes articles are no follow. So there's technically very little to no SEO value for a Forbes backlink. But also these paid services, they're not going out onto the main Forbes website. They're not going out into their primary magazine. These are literally, it's just a sales tactic. So these backlinks go on this like obscure back end part of the website that nobody ever sees. So there's very, very little value to things like that. It's better to try and generate real backlinks from, like we said, local partners, or maybe you create really good content that you do some journalistic outreach for and get some real backlinks in terms of a journalist and a media outlet actually citing you versus a paid service. When will we receive results? As I said, anywhere from 3 months to 12, depending on competition, how much you've invested, how old the site is, lots of different factors there. Why aren't we ranking number one? That's a tough one. So your challenge with SEO these days is a high variability. We talked about personalization, two people sitting next to each other and not going to get the same results. Location is a primary ranking signal these days. And so the result you get right here is going to be different than the result across the street, literally, is going to be different than the result the other side of town. And so ranking number one is highly variable based on all of these other factors. Also, you have competitors. And so you are ranking number one. Competitor says, hey, we want the number one spot. We're going to pay a bunch of money and put a bunch of time and effort in to knock you guys off that spot and take it. And sometimes they're able to do that. So now you have to go back and see what they did and then see how you can combat that and see how you can get Google to like you better. So there's a lot of back and forth that happens in the SEO world. And then it takes time, it takes effort. There is no paint by number strategy. You can't just do some baseline optimizations and then assume you're going to rank number one. If it was that easy, right? We'd all be doing it, but two, it wouldn't have any value because people could just flip flop number one all the time by doing little tweaks. So it is very time intensive in terms of evaluating your content, evaluating all the back-end technical optimizations, tweaking them, seeing if they had an impact. Was it a positive impact, a negative impact, and continue to play with it. It can take a long time to get up to number one. Usually that movement from like page 50 to page 2 is not so hard because most providers aren't investing in really good SEO. A lot of agencies aren't that good at it, to be quite honest. And so it can be pretty easy to get, a lot of movement fast. But then that last bit from getting the bottom of page 1 up to the top of page 1 can be quite challenging. We have tons of traffic. Why aren't we getting any calls? So traffic is a proxy KPI. Obviously, we want qualified calls. It could be the type of content that you're ranking for. Maybe you have a page on Charlie Sheen's latest debacle. And in that case, you have a lot of trending searches. Tons of people are hitting your website because someone put up an article that had something to do with Charlie Sheen. But these people are not searching for services. They just want to know what's going on with Charlie Sheen. So you can see a lot of traffic that doesn't translate to results. Also, it could be, you could have a bad web page. Maybe you get a lot of people to the page, but the web page itself isn't appealing. That could be an issue. You have a lot of informational content that you're ranking for. So again, we have our money terms. We have the terms that are going to help us convert people to patients. Those terms are not the same as informational. So maybe your informational pages are ranking, but your kind of money terms aren't ranking. Lots of factors that can play into why you might get tons of traffic, but maybe not get inquiries off of it. Related, we just lost a ton of traffic. What the heck's going on? The algorithm's changing all the time. It's really frustrating. It's frustrating for agencies. It's frustrating for teams. It's frustrating for executives. But just because you are number one today does not mean that you're going to be number one tomorrow. There's 4 algorithm updates a day. Some of those core algorithm updates are massive, and it can have nothing to do with the quality of the SEO. Google can just decide that they're going to change the result sets, and they're no longer going to show providers that offer services, and they're only going to show government websites or informational websites or large database style websites. Google can decide what kind of website it wants to rank for particular search terms, and that is going to have an impact if you continue to rank. That localization piece was big. A lot of our clients lost results over time because they could no longer rank nationally, and now they only rank local. Whereas once maybe we got 1,000 clicks because we were getting all the clicks across the country, now we're only getting 10 clicks because we're only getting the clicks from the city in which we're ranking now. For a lot of providers, that doesn't really matter. Again, that traffic to qualified inquiry being the primary metric. if we've got traffic nationally, but we're a local provider, it's a waste of our time to be answering calls from someone in New York if we're based in San Diego and we serve our local community. So actually, Google has done a service to most providers here, and it's allowing you to focus your efforts locally, which is where for most providers the efforts should be, because those are the people that you want inquiring. Really good question that we often get asked is like, once we rank, can we just stop SEO efforts, right? Why do we have to keep paying money or paying the staff to do that? And the answer, unfortunately, is usually no. So SEO results are pretty sticky for the most part. Once you're ranking, Google likes you, and so it's likely to keep liking you if you don't mess with anything or change anything. And your website has part of that authority. And so if your website's good, then that's going to support your page content. But competitors are still coming in all the time, and competitors are going to see your ranking. They're going to try to figure out why you're ranking. They're going to try and kind of back engineer that. And then they're going to do the same optimizations to their website and to their pages. And then maybe they add something that Google likes a little bit better, so they knock you off. So for these situations, you generally need continued SEO investment to deal with the competitors, and then you need to deal with the algorithm changes. So sometimes you can go back and re-optimize a page to better match the recent algorithm updates. Or, as I mentioned with the change in the result sets, if now Google is displaying only government websites for a particular search term, and that search term worked for you, and you got qualified inquiries off of it, you'll never get qualified inquiries from that search term again. So now your SEO team has to pivot, and they have to understand what they can be ranking for instead that's going to backfill those missing inquiries. Now, that could be an SEO solution, or it could be that you just need to switch investment and switch more to paid media or to another channel that is going to allow you to get in front of those people that you were getting in front of before. That's a capital allocation decision that you have to make. But at the end of the day, your SEO efforts, unfortunately, are usually not able to be reduced or decreased just because you started ranking. Talked about this one quite a bit. What does an SEO team look like? So you have your primary 3 SEO specialists are your technical, your on-page, and your off-page. Now, these people tend to be highly specialized, and so you generally still need a manager coordinating those individuals. What are they focusing on? How are you guys building your systems and processes so that team is working together and working in the same direction? So that's a minimum of 4 people just on the SEO side of things. Again, a lot of SEO specialists don't have content writing expertise. They're not graphic designers. And so you need people that have separate expertise for those components. You generally want an editor. You want someone coordinating those teams together. So how is that process working? So you're talking about 5, maybe 6 staff members on average to do decent SEO work. If you want to invest in that, if that makes sense for your organization based on its size, it's a very smart investment. Generally, the SEO results in terms of your cost per inquiry or qualified inquiry is much lower than other channels once you start ranking. But also you have this challenge where, are you really going to have a full-time content writer that just writes all day, every day? Are you going to have a full-time graphic designer? What are they doing with all their time? Do you need a full-time graphic designer for 5 to 10 images a day that they're producing? Or do you just need some blog topics, a couple times a month? Might make more sense to outsource those components, either completely to an agency or maybe different pieces of it. So you might have a core SEO team and then you outsource the content writing or you outsource the graphic design. Those are different setups that are viable. So coming out of the data, I want to look a little bit at the website and what's available to us. So here you can see, for example, this is one of our larger clients. And so they've got 57 million visitors within this particular data set. Now, a couple things here. So one, you can see that over the past roughly 2 years, their traffic has been dropping. And so what's going on there, right? You're thinking, hey, Nick, you're showing us this really large client where your traffic is getting worse over time. Not very smart. So this is an important illustration because this client has a great SEO strategy and gets most of, I shouldn't say most, but they get a lot of admissions from their SEO to really, really good cost per admission. But what we had to do is they used to rank really well nationally. And so over time, Google has shrunken the radius in which large websites are able to rank and they have preferred local websites. So we had to shift away from a centralized umbrella website strategy and move to a multi-website strategy. So now we have individual websites for all of this provider's locations instead of just having one website. And that's been extremely effective. So what we've seen is this traffic we're losing from the umbrella website has shifted and then actually surpassed in the location websites that we built, unique to each location. And this is part of why you have to think strategically about your SEO and your other marketing channels. We could have just tried to fight the algorithm and tried to find different ways to get this traffic back and get these inquiries back. We didn't do that. We said, we see where Google's going. And so the smart thing to do here is to focus on our local optimization SEO and shift that budget and shift those efforts there because it makes more sense. So that's part of what's happening here. Another part is related to the no-click data that we talked about. So as more AI results are common, as more no-click results are common, then you're going to see here that on average, a lot of websites during the past 6 months, at least at the time of this recording, are seeing drops in their traffic because more results are shifting to no-click data. Couple pieces here. This is your back end for your Google Analytics, your GA4. You can connect everything into here if you want. You can connect your Google Ads. You can connect your Google Search Console data. Google Search Console data is your kind of more pure SEO data. So your GA4 will give you insights to traffic coming from everywhere, whereas your Google Search Console data will just focus on organic search results versus maybe traffic coming from Facebook or traffic coming from Google Ads. Google Search Console will actually cut out that data, so it's not you can get a little clearer picture. So organic search is what you think of when you think of your Google Search Console data. Direct, again, is people going directly to the website. They're just typing in your web address. They're not searching for it online. They just go directly there. Referrals are referrals from across the web. Organic social is from social media platforms, email, SMS, etc. You can scroll down. You can see the different pages. So where are the people coming from? You can click into this data, get a clearer sense on it. You can go on the left, you can go here, you can see you got your Search Console integrated. So we look at the query data here. That's going to pull up. So as we scroll down, we can see what searches we're consistently ranking for, how many clicks, how many impressions, what's our average position that we show up for when people do those searches, what's the click-through rate. So when we do show up, what percentage of people actually click on our listing versus the competitors. And then again, you can also look at that from a page standpoint and look at those same metrics. So there's a lot of really valuable data that your team has access to. So they can understand what terms are we ranking for, what terms are people searching for that we want to rank for that we're maybe not yet. Can we get higher up in the rankings? Maybe we're position 7, we want to be position 1. Can we do that and how? What pages are ranking? What keywords on those pages are ranking? There's a lot of data that you have available that's really, as an executive, you don't really need to get too deep into the weeds on that. Just understand that your team has access to this data and they're using it, or obviously they should be using it to make informed decisions about what's working or not working for your SEO strategy.